Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of Council for Monday, July 9th. We'd like to acknowledge we are meeting on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish people as we gather this evening for our meeting. Looking for approval of our agenda this evening, Council?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? None. Thank you very much. Public participation. This is an opportunity for those of you in the audience who might want to make a comment to attend the podium, and we're happy to hear from you. Yeah, I can see you're all jumping up. I will take it that there is no interest. Oh, come on, Peter.
Hi, Peter DeSwagger, Burrard Group. I'm representing Olympic View Land Development. Thank you for the opportunity for OV to express our concerns with regards to bylaw 1700. Firstly, we appreciate the sober second look that staff and council are taking at the OCP before its adoption. And thank you for including commercial uses in our master plan, in our CD2 zone master plan. We have always intended to have development of a commercial component in our master plan. Secondly, I want to reiterate the question of why is OV not considered part of the intended growth area? We've always had a plan to develop OV. It's currently entitled CD2 and has entitlements for 456 units in Colwood and another 456 units in Langford. Third, just the item 6.1.3, the status report from the Director of Planning. I just want to point out that OV has been in the in-stream development of our project since 2011, and it's had an approved DP since and a PLA for phase 1 since 2012. And we're working with staff currently to flesh out the details where the devil is in our phase 1 plan, and we look forward to working with staff on that process, although we consider the substantial delays and the shifting goalposts to be unreasonable considering our zoning. Thank you.
Any other members of the public? And for a final time, anyone wanting to address council? Seeing none, we shall move on. Mayor's message. There are a number of things that have happened, and first off, I think on behalf of council and City of Colwood, happy birthday, Loha Chong. So with that aside, hope you're having a great weekend. Want to draw your attention to the mural that's on the sidewall here. This is a paper replica of the mural that was carved out of cedar with the Songhees artist Butch Dick. It will be installed next to Blue Heron House over at Royal Roads property across the lagoon from us, so we should be able to see it pretty near from the water, because this is only a 75% sizing of that, so it's quite an extensive piece that's been carved, and we look forward to having it installed across the water there. Eats and Beats happened this weekend. How many of you in the audience were there besides Doug?
Oh, yeah.
I have to say thank you to Sandra and staff and the many, many, many hands that it took, and all the public that showed up. We figure that was in excess of 8,000 people over the course of the day. So that's a significant increase from last year, and we're happy to share what we have at our wonderful lagoon. So thanks for that. The driftwood art, I don't know if you noticed along when you were coming in, that's artist Paul Lewis, who's the fellow that has so graciously donated those pieces down at the lagoon. These were special ones that were done up for the event, and we will use them in events in the future for the city. Neighborhood Nights, Meadow Park in Royal Bay will be having activities on Thursday evening. I'm sorry I don't have a time start, but July and August, they will be running events throughout the summer, so it might be something to check in if you're looking for things to do on Thursday at evenings. Rock the Shores happens next weekend, or this coming up weekend, July 13th through 15th. So you can expect to hear a bit of music blasting from that site, and I think Councillor Logan's on his way down there. Movies on the Hill, West Shore Parks and Rec is running August the 16th, The Last Jedi. So there was one shown last weekend too. Saturday they had one, and I understand it was well attended. Fort Rod Hill has a number of events that are on their list. Learn to Camp is happening this weekend, July 14th and 15th. Movie night and camp out on July 27th. Stargazing on August the 10th. And, of course, we have the Colwood Seaside Festival come September 15th. So those are all events that are happening right here, close to home, almost within walking distance.
It seems to start at 6, 6 to 8:30.
This is Colwood Creek Park.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, I couldn't find the other one, but I was thinking it might be the same times.
Oh, could be. So, yeah, activities at Colwood Creek Park that are ongoing too in there. Those ones you can find on our website. Anybody else from council that has anything that's happening? This is our last official meeting for, scheduled meeting for the season, and we will be taking summer break between this this meeting and then August the 27th, I think, is the next one. So with that, Councillor Day?
I just thought of something I should share. I don't actually send it out, but the chair of the Disabilities Committee tweets out free, family-friendly, fun events that are on throughout the Capital Regional District that are good ideas for inclusive activities that you can do with your kids or with anyone that you know who might have a mobility challenge. So you can find her at IACDI on Twitter and hear about events that she tries to share out to create good, inclusive fun.
Good. Anybody else? Councillor Nault?
Thank you. I had the opportunity to attend Canada Day celebrations at Fort Rod. Feeling was the crowds were a little bit smaller than usual, but enthusiastic. The really nice thing is on stage, instead of having a bunch of politicians spouting off at them, they had a justice of the peace, I believe it was, taking everybody through the citizenship oath again. So everybody that wanted to could recite the citizenship oath, and I thought that was very moving on Canada Day. And the cake was great too. 4 feet by 8 feet.
Great, thank you. One set of minutes for adoption. Regular meeting of council, June the 25th.
Move adoption, Your Worship.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? None. Thank you very much. 1 set of minutes for receipt. Board of Variance from May the 22nd. Move receipt. All those in favor? Opposed? None. Thank you. Correspondence requiring council. We have a letter here from Randy Royer, who is the principal on the Pacific Landing project.
I'll move for receipt, Your Worship.
I got staff here for a second.
Your Worship, I'd just like to give some context to this item. It relates to the later item with respect to the Pendray House, item 5. Item 6.1.2, and it came out of conversations with staff and the property owner to acknowledge what staff's doing and show council that there is some cooperation with staff and the property owner in terms of there being alignment in intentions for the Pendray House.
Sorry, I just have one
Yep.
comment. So through you, Mayor, to staff, should we perhaps take this letter as a reference and include it with 6.1.2?
Your Worship, I think procedurally speaking, it doesn't matter. It's just I wanted to highlight it because that's how it came to be on the agenda. And the staff report was completed, and on the agenda by the time this this letter came in, and that's why it was attached separately.
All those in favor of receipt? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Planning and land use, item 6.1.1, report on Royal Bay Latoria North Parks Plan.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is the North Parks Plan, Latoria North Parks Plan that's being presented tonight for council consideration. The boundary of that parks area is shown on the staff report in Appendix 1, which I believe is page 29 of your agenda. The Parks Concept Plan for Latoria North was adopted by Council in 2017 as a refinement to the concept for the Royal Bay Plan. And as part of that, there was a zoning amendment and also a development agreement. And within that development agreement, were attached terms of reference for each park segment. And those terms of reference are also attached in your report as Appendix 2, which I believe is page 30 of your agenda. We have representatives here tonight from Gablecraft that can provide you an overview or answer any specific questions you may have. I should say the timing of the construction of each park segment will be triggered by the subdivision of the associated lands. And our understanding is that Gablecraft estimates this will take place over approximately the next 5 to 6 years. In respect to Murray's Pond, there were concerns, staff also have concerns regarding the protection of the environmental integrity of Murray's Pond. And Gablecraft has agreed that in 2019, they will provide temporary fencing around the pond and a pathway connection from Perimeter Park to Ryder Hesjedal Way to basically stop the shortcutting that's starting to happen through Murray's Pond. Should also notify council that staff will be providing a budget request in 2019 regarding construction of a viewing platform on Murray's Pond. The other item that is important for council to note is that each park segment will have a warranty period after which it's ours. And what that means is that we will be responsible for the maintenance of those parks as they are turned over to the city. And the terms of reference do specify maintenance levels. Staff have estimated that when the Latoria North Park system is completed, there will be annual maintenance costs somewhere in the order of $210,000 a year in 2018 dollars. And that concludes the report from planning.
Comments, questions from Councillor Knoll?
A couple of comments. First, I think it's a fabulous park plan. There's some really ambitious stuff in there, like the rain garden. I like the selection of plants that they've put in the rain garden and so forth. It looks a lot of native plants, something I like to see. I'm going to be curious as to how well their slope remediation goes. That's going to be a very difficult project to keep trees living up there. And just on that point, how long is the warranty period?
On the Northbridge slopes, the warranty period is 5 years.
Thank you. And yeah, I read the financial implications with great interest. $210,000. If you jump to page 85 of our agenda, we have the parks budget for 2018, which was $2.7 million. This is a 10% jump in our parks budget just for these parks. Something we're going to have to consider very carefully at budget time, and if the maintenance is written into the terms of reference, I don't know that we have much opportunity to change that, so we better be braced for those kind of increases over the next 5 to 10 years.
Councillor Day?
Thank you. I read the report with great interest. I think the parks are certainly very important to the neighborhoods. both those new neighborhoods that are being created in Royal Bay and also the existing neighborhoods that we hope everyone will integrate together nicely through meeting at the park. I have a few concerns, mostly in terms of the quantity of trees, for example, that are going to be added. When I was reading through Appendix 2, I would see numbers like 20% or 30% of the park would be shrubs, but I saw no numbers identifying how many trees were going to be included. And then when I got further down looking through the report, I did find some numbers for trees, but nowhere did I see anything about how much soil was being added. And because much of this site is a mined out or non-functioning anymore gravel quarry, the overburden was removed to the south side of Latoria Road. And I'm just concerned that without the soils, there's references to hydroseeding, for example, and I feel quite strongly that the hydroseeding won't be successful if there's no soil. So do we have some quantification that we can point to and we're firm about?
Your Worship, through you, staff are bringing this report to council for approval of the concept. There is much work in terms of the details that Councillor Day is referring to that staff will be working on as we progress through these, the more detailed parks planning.
If I may, I think that's excellent, excellent news. I'm very happy to hear that because I know there's it's a big elephant to take into account. The other thing that I wanted to just flag at this point in time for consideration is the user-friendly trail guide. And there is a toolkit that was developed for that in 2012 with the Disability Committee. It's we did a very large project. We had about $100,000 in funding, grant funding from the provincial government. We undertook to do one accessible improvement in each West Shore municipality, and we highlighted those success stories through the user-friendly trail guide, which has been very, very popular with both seniors and people with disabilities. So it gives a couple of things. It gives some standards for surfacing, that's requirements. It gives some standards about grades, both cross slopes and grades for how to determine what's accessible. And even more importantly, it gave some really good guidance for some universal signage standards. And I'm really hopeful that we can implement that, that standard signage for our parks so that people can know and make their own decisions about what's accessible for them. So it gives you an idea. And if you need any of that information to refresh your memory, I'd be happy to share it.
Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Worship. I'm actually quite loving the concept plan, and you can really see how Meadow Park South is starting to, like, the vision is coming together when the homes are being constructed along the fence of the park and the one side of the park, and so it's I don't know, it's looking more like a community, you know, not just a park stuck in the middle of a former gravel pit, but it's really incorporating into a community, which I think is really funky. You can start to see the vision. What I like actually about this concept plan, and I would encourage us to move forward, is just the other elements that, like the wayfinding elements that are interesting, and they're, you know, you don't have to water them, but they're interesting and exciting. They're bright, and same with the plazas and that sort of stuff. And so I think one thing that I would suggest too is, being a parent of 3 kids, when we're looking at the play area, that the equipment is substantial, or at least the play area is substantial. And I'll actually refer to the area in West Hills, who have really done a good job in providing a really good facility for young kids there. And I'd really like to, I'd really like to kind of replicate that type of idea here, because that equipment's substantial, and it's a nice feel as a parent, and a safe feel. So I think this is great, and I really applaud the applicant for moving up the protection of Murray's Pond and encouraging another link for folks to be able to walk through the site. It's a very busy site, becoming busier. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Martin?
Thank you. I'm obviously happy with the park. I guess my only question through Mayor to staff is, do we feel as though this is the most economically efficient design out there? And I guess my concern is that I look at the park that's presently at Royal Bay, and we're already starting to see some weeds coming up through the rocks and that, which is obviously going to make it very difficult to maintain long term. So I'm just wondering, is this design something that we feel very confident that we'll be easily able to take care of, and it's within a range that's reasonable?
Through you, Your Worship, 2 points to bring to council attention. One is this concept is the concept that council basically adopted as part of the 2017 rezoning. So this notion was already something that council endorsed. Secondly, there has been a fair amount of discussion amongst staff about how we maintain the expectations around maintenance, which is part of the reason that we brought forward those maintenance numbers to your attention. So it is something we're very aware of. And we, I don't want to speak on behalf of the Director of Engineering, but it's something I think we can maintain those maintenance levels.
Anybody else? I just want clarification.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Director of Engineering looked like she wanted to say something. Did you want to say something?
Through your worship, the dollar values that we had put forward were associated with the levels of maintenance that were outlined in the covenant. So they're a lot more detailed than the phase 1 plan was insofar as this. So we could firm up the numbers a little bit more easily. And this all does tie into levels of service. And so we will be doing our best to bring forward levels of service for parks to council when we can. But it's always a good thing to have in the back of your head that higher maintenance does mean higher costs. And expectations do need to be managed somewhat. So it's that fine balancing act, no doubt.
And before we get to a recommendation, I would just want clarification from staff. The recommendation says approve the Latoria North Park Plan as prepared by the landscape architects. But I've heard you say concept plan. So by using this recommendation, are we changing the intent of this?
What we're recommending to council is that they, should they choose, adopt the plans that are attached to the staff report.
And you'll continue to work on the detail, as
Correct.
Councillor Day had pointed out.
Correct.
Councillor Day.
Sorry, just one last thing, and I found it in, I can't tell if it's Appendix 8, and it's on page 22 of 26 of my report on my iPad, and it's Royal Bay Northridge Park area. And just something that caught my eye when I was going through it was it shows a picture of the ridge, and the caption at the top is future restoration area bracket by others. So my understanding looking at this plan was that this is presenting a plan for that ridge. Is that area not going to be dealt with in this plan?
Through your worship, the applicant, for their own reasons, decided to split the development of the concept between two consultants. So when it's the reference to others is actually attached to your report, and it's noted as a Royal Bay development is done by Khaled Services. So those three drawings are the Northridge drawings.
Thank you very much for the clarification.
So council ready for a recommendation?
I'll move the recommendation, Your Worship.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? None opposed? Thank you. Item 6.1.2, in regards to heritage preservation of the Pendray House. This is the associated letter from earlier in their agenda.
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff report before you, it precipitated from some news that we received that the owners of the Pacific Landing development had placed an ad advertising for sale the parcel at which the Pendray House is located. That spawned some consideration of what are the actual protections for the heritage value that I think Council is well aware of the Pendray House. Attached to the report is a appendix that briefly outlines some of the history that from a CRD report. So in the review that staff did, we note that there is no legal preservation of the heritage value of the Pendray House right now that the city could invoke to prevent it from being altered. There is the opportunity for council to direct staff to take opportunities at the time of strata title conversion or subdivision. That wouldn't create immediate opportunities for heritage preservation, but it would allow the approving officer to invoke the public interest as a means to protect the heritage value of the Pendray House through a covenant. Another option for council would be to designate the Pendray House as a heritage site under existing provincial legislation. This would have more immediate protection for the building. However, there would potentially be some cost implications for the city, and if council directed staff to go down that route, we would be responding with a staff report that outlined potential cost implications. As I mentioned earlier, the owner of the site is interested in protecting the heritage values of the structure and supports staff's recommendation for council to direct staff to take opportunities through the subdivision or strata title process. So with that, I conclude my introduction. Thank you.
Members of council, Councillor Day.
Thank you. The Pendray House has a very long history in the city of Colwood, and we have lost quite a few of our heritage assets over time. There was another 1930s mansion that was torn down about 10 years ago, and there was very little that was could be done to protect it at that time. And I think it's important to preserve the heritage, even where our heritage isn't as old sometimes as we think it is. The Pendray House was built in the 1930s. My neighbor, who lived in Colwood since the early 1950s, told me stories about going there for tea. The Pendray family were involved with Bapco Paints, and there's quite a story that runs throughout our community. There's also some things that have happened over the years that lead to there being a very good story. One of the many uses for the Pendray estate was summer camps, as well as counseling for troubled youth. One of those troubled youths actually set the beautiful staircase on fire at one point in time, and it was completely gutted and had to be rebuilt. You wouldn't know that when you went into the house and you saw the beautiful staircase that's there now, that was actually something that was rebuilt and put back. And I think it's of great, it's a great anchoring point for your community to have history that's maybe older than the house I live in or the house you live in, or that just shows something of what we were once upon the time. You know, the Pendray estate was around for a lot of significant events in our past, and we've done a lot to protect that heritage. So I would certainly like to see us do something. And I realize there's kind of this catch-22. It hasn't been protected up until this point. It was for many years in the hands of people who truly valued it as a great site and served youth and families out of it for a long time. But you know, it was a difficult building for them to do everything that they wanted to do in. And that's probably going to be the case going forward. So there may be some, you know, some work that needs to take place in order to find a meaningful use for Pendray House going forward. But I would certainly like to see us look at using all of our powers to conserve the Pendray House, and specifically through a bylaw, which I don't think our processes are so difficult that we couldn't make amendments when necessary to allow future uses to proceed.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. I don't disagree with anything that Councillor Day said. However, through you to staff, have we done any investigation on the land around the Pendray House? I've been there when a king tide has happened and the water's right at the building. And we're now talking, you know, everything I've heard, we're talking about one meter ocean rise in the next 50 to 100 years. Is that building actually going to be able to survive if we actually start seeing the environmental changes that everybody's forecasting? And if the environment changes significantly, how would that affect the designation of this house if it was actually being undermined by the water?
Your Worship, I think it would be a very important consideration if staff was directed to proceed with a bylaw designating under the Provincial Act as a part of our Heritage Registry and protected under that legislation, that we'd want to take into consideration the cost benefit for the city doing that, and the potential impacts from sea level rise would be part of that analysis, and wrapped up with the potential financial implications that would have.
Sorry, just as a quick follow-up. So we haven't done that so far from a staff level?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments? Councillor Knoll?
So I will echo Councillor Martin's comments there. I have been there after a winter storm, and there have been logs thrown up as far as the parking lot around that building. So sea level rise and winter storms are going to be a big issue, whether it's a heritage house or not. On it being a very old house, I'm just tore down my old house about 2 years ago, and it dated back parts of it to 1917. Unfortunately, it had been modified, I think, in 1940, 1960, 1970, 1975, so very little heritage left to it. It was just a lot of very bad construction. So I would definitely support the staff recommendation that we proceed their way. If council wants to suggest we do it under the Local Government Act, I would support that too, but that will have costs to the city.
Any further comments? Are you making the motion recommendation, Councillor Knoll?
I will remove the recommendation under Part 6.
Second.
Councillor.
Thank
Martin?
you. Can I just get a clarification because of Councillor Nault's comment? This recommendation we're looking at right now is not the provincial, correct? This is just us. So there shouldn't be a financial?
That is correct. This would basically bolster the ability of the approving officer to secure a covenant to protect the heritage value at the time of strata title conversion or subdivision. Yep.
Councillor Day?
Thank you. Couple of unanswered questions, I guess, for me still. I thoroughly agree that the sea level rise is a real concern for that property. But I don't think that there's nothing we can do. It is always going to be the big storms that are the issue. I guess my question is, what is the expense? Is it the expense strictly the drafting of the bylaw, or is there some other expense that I'm not aware of?
Madam Mayor, the expenses that would potentially be most significant would be compensation to the owner for loss of potential use. I can't quantify what they would be at this time. We would have to go through an analysis. And also there would be a cost in terms of assessing what aspects of the structure are important from a heritage standpoint. Council may recall the Statement of Significance report that was prepared for the Coa Dairy and Cheese House. So we would be looking for a qualified consultant to undertake a similar study for this structure as well.
So that would take place following this resolution that's on the table, the recommendation?
That is correct.
Thank you. Any other comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 6.1.3, status on planning and land development report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before you is I think, a relatively self-explanatory report, and I'd just like to highlight the fact that this is a report not from the Planning Department, but from the city as a whole, and reporting on planning and land development. So both staff from planning, engineering, and land development have contributed to this report. We did have, it's meant to be a quarterly report. I'd like to highlight the fact that there was an interim status report prepared in February, which was made public. Some of the main highlights to note is that we're seeing a real shift between rezoning and efficiently plan activity, so that the very beginning stages of the development pipeline towards implementation of rezonings and efficiently plan work. So a real drop-off in rezonings and a huge uptick in work associated with implementing plans. So that's reflective in the statistics presented on page 57 of 473. College's really lucky to have some exciting projects underway at the moment. 330 Goldstream Avenue. This is the Greater Victoria Housing Society's project, which is very close, I think, to receiving an approved development permit for what could be the largest residential building to be built to the passive house standard. So quite a neat project. Also would highlight a project on Island Highway, the Galaxy Motors project at 1764 Island Highway. This represents a $5 million investment in Colwood through Galaxy Motors to build a new showroom and service facility. We are working through the applicant to improve the relationship of the building relative to our design guidelines, but it is quite a substantial project on Island Highway there. As I said, I think the report largely speaks for itself, and happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Council? I'll kick it off. So we heard earlier this evening about not having Olympic View in the listing in here. Where do they fall in this?
I think it is an omission not to have Olympic View in the list. It was, this is an evolving report. Initially, it was a planning status update. Now it's a planning and land development update. I think internally we're talking about how we can add value to this quarterly update to include things like capital projects. One of the challenges we have with applications like Olympic View is it's an environmental development permit. What we're trying to do is show as much as possible imagery, and as you can see, every entry has an elevation or architectural drawing. With Olympic View, we're dealing with quite large plans, and it would be difficult to convey in a graphic sense what's happening with that application, although I do think that the next version should capture applications like that.
And so you'd say that they're in stream?
Correct, yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments? The ones that are listed for Wishart Gardens, is that still within phase 1, or is that moving into phase 2?
I believe that's part of phase 1.
Through you, Your Worship, phase 1, which is mostly the single-family dwellings, has for the most part been completed. Phase 2, which is the townhouses, is under construction and will soon be completed.
So that one will be coming.
So they will be moving on to the rest of phase 2, which is the condo site. Well, okay. So phase 1 is the single family and the townhouse site, stand corrected. And phase 2 is the condo site, which has not yet been started.
Okay, so the condo one is still in the works. Alrighty, thank you. Anybody else? Need a motion to receive, I believe.
Move receipt, Your Worship.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Transportation and public infrastructure 6.2.1. This is in regards to an offer we have received in leasing the municipal building located at 170 Goldfinch.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. At the regular meeting of Council on May 14th, Council considered the request to lease the municipal building located at 170 Goldfinch to relevant properties. The consideration to lease received positive resolution with the conditions that were outlined in that report and were included in the public notice. Council as well resolved that staff should work with the leasee to include a termination clause that worked to ensure that the city had the same rights to terminate the agreement as the leasee. So we have since been working with the leasee and our solicitors, and we have drafted up the lease and included in termination clause. Due to the fact that the terms of the lease were included in the consideration of May 14th, a revision of those terms to include the termination clauses must be brought back to Council for their consideration. So, the proposed right to terminate has been enabled to Colwood in the following manner. The leasee has indicated that there's going to be substantial costs in improving the heating, roofing, and decking and exterior of the building as well as interior renovations. So I've requested a minimum of 3-year term within the 5-year initial onset of the lease, so a minimum of 3 years, the first 3 years where there is no right to terminate. After 3 years, the city may terminate the lease by a resolution of council, whereby the leasee would have the opportunity to attend that council meeting, and if council resolved that they would terminate the lease, that the leasee would have 90 days to vacate the property. There would be cost to the city in regards of a termination at year 3, 4, or 5. And those costs are the total cost of the improvements on the building amortized per year in a linear rate, and then applied to whatever term was left outstanding in the lease, up to 5 years. After 5 years, because that's the term of the extension of the lease, there would be no financial burden to the city to terminate the lease. However, it would still require a meeting of council, whereby the leasee would be notified of that meeting, and if council resolved to terminate that lease, that it would have the leasee would have 90 days on which to vacate. In viewing the report that is available to you on your agenda digitally, I'm aware that there is a missing page. That missing page is in the financial consideration section, where I've tried to spell out how the amortized cost would be realized in year 4 and 5. And regrettably, the recommendation to council is also being excluded from what you're viewing in that page. If you'd like, I can read the options and the recommendations that are available to council, because there are only 3. The first option would be to receive their support and direct the CAO to enter into the lease agreement with the right to terminate. The second option, essentially, is enter into the lease agreement as previously vetted, which would not include the right to terminate, or decide not to lease the property at all, which would amount to a rescinding of the resolution of May 14th, and not enter the lease agreement. Thank you.
Questions to staff, because we're missing page 4 of that report. Councillor Day.
Thank you. Just more than anything to refresh my memory, the leasee is maintaining insurance on the building and paying taxes annually as well as leasing?
Thank you very much, through your worship. Yes, the leasee will pay taxes on the building. They are required to maintain and provide upgrades to the building as a condition of that initial 5-year terms of the lease. Those were listed and included improvements to the heating and infrastructures.
Great. Thank you.
Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Your Worship. The terms certainly seem reasonable and present a really good value for the city, in my opinion, considering it sits vacant currently. My question is, when would the lease be effective?
The leasee had a desire to commence the lease on July 1st.
Perfect.
It frankly, through the iterations to the lawyer, getting their acceptance of the terms, this was all new to them, as well as the financial potential remuneration of early termination. So it took an extra week to resolve. And so, quite frankly, from the resolution here, we're ready to move from draft. And it could be as early as the 15th or the end of the month, whichever was timed up for to make most sense.
Councillor Knoll.
Yes, I was curious. Costs of the improvements are mentioned again and again, but nowhere are they quantified. Do we have an estimate of how much that is? How big our financial liability would be to terminate a lease?
I do, but would be embarrassed almost to say it. The numbers float around, and between what has been determined to be an interior improvement of the building, which would be potentially kitchen systems that they were trying to sell, the leasee has identified up to $1 million of improvement costs going to this building. This is a trailer. So the improvements that will be actualized and remain with the building is not quantified to be $1 million, but I don't have my finger on that value. I'm sorry.
And that makes it difficult for me to figure out which route to take. I mean, is it going to be, if we terminate the lease, is it going to be a $5,000 liability, $50,000, $60,000, $100,000? Really, I would want that information before I vote on it, because originally I was totally against the idea of leasing this, but now seeing how many improvements are required on the building, and if Colwood wanted to maintain the building, that would become taxpayers' responsibility. But without having real numbers, it's kind of hard to make a decision.
Regrettably, on that missing page of the agenda package, my apologies for that. What we've worked out is that 85% of the value that's to remain on the building, so not 100% of the capital cost, but 85% of the cost would be our upset target, and then it would be amortized as a straight line over 5 years. So essentially 20% of those costs would be taken up each year. So I did a $100,000 cost analysis for you. And I said that if 100,000 was the value, and 85% of that value was applied, that'd be an $85,000 amortized at 20% per year, is about $17,000 per year. If we just add a zero onto that and say that it's $1 million worth of improvements, that means that it's $170,000 per year. Now, we don't believe that $1 million can be applied to a trailer in a heating or roofing system, but we could extrapolate that to say $500,000. Now, they will have to take building permits out on it. They do have to obtain our approval, and they do have to apply for a development permit for an exterior cladding. So staff would continue to be vested in it. And what we've spoken with our solicitor about is if council did come back and say, staff, we wish we've entered into this new agreement, or we'd like to consider a new agreement, and we'd like the right to terminate, staff's first action is to quantify those values for you. And so we would have a complete itemized list of those costs and implications at that time.
Good. Anybody else? Councillor Martin?
Thank you. So may I please have, through the mayor, I'm trying to understand the capital improvements. So I understand that it's building heating system and so on. But if they build out a display kitchen, are they allowed to take all that back, or does that become ours? Like, so how does it get defined what's ours and what's not?
Knowing how they're going to improve the interior is, frankly, I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head on some of the questions that we work through as staff as well. And the intention of the interior space of the building is to use it as a marketing suite. So we can fully expect 1 or 2 bathrooms, 1 or 2 kitchens to be brought about in there. I believe, right, the lease is written that anything that we don't want to be in the building shall be removed. Anything that's attached to the building as part of the roof or the structure of the building, which includes the deck and staircases, those would remain. If the city elected to keep the kitchen or a bathroom improvement, that would simply become one of those financial costs that we would then entertain at that time and bring about a value at the time of termination of that lease. The difficulty is that it wouldn't be a quantified improvement unless it needed a building permit to go about it. So certain aspects of interior renovations may not require a building permit, and I would suspect that a cabinet may be under that category.
So I'm sorry, I'm still lost from a standpoint of this. So 5 years ends, we want the bathroom, and they go, no, those are ours, and they start yanking it out. How do I know? How do we know, or through this agreement, how do we control what we get to keep and what we don't get to keep?
Through the worship, presently there is a bathroom in the building. So if there was an additional building included and we said that we would like it kept, it would be negotiated terms of council at that point in time.
At the end.
At that point, and we could do that at the 5-year mark when council has to consider the renewal application of that lease. If we elected that we don't want the bathroom because for some reason the leasee says that that was a $500,000 bathroom and we're not vested in that or interested in it, then the leasee is responsible of not only removing it but taking the building back to a usable state. So that would be bringing back the floor, taking out those improvements and returning it in a kind state, which would be improved because it would actually have had occupation for the last period of years.
Okay. Thank you. One final question, and I realize I'm throwing another wrench into this, but the lands around the building, who's maintaining that? Is that us, them, and it's not a park, it's a, what is it? Green space, thank you.
Through your worship, the lands around the building are a lot that is considered for park purposes and park use. The lease includes a 5-meter envelope around the structure itself and the use of the access road and the parking lot. That's because that's their view corridor and they want to improve the plants around that. Other than that, all of the remainder of the land outside that 5-meter envelope directly surrounding the building is the city's and the city's maintenance goals.
Councillor Day?
Thank you. I'm feeling less comfortable by the minute with the proposal, simply because my difficulty is that we don't have a system. It doesn't appear to me that we have a system of checks and balances that, you know, they put in a bathroom and they say it's $1 million bathroom, and we say, no, it's not $1 million bathroom. So the result is they take it out. Now, this has already been a show suite. It has already had a bathroom and a couple kitchens. I've been down there. It looked lovely, but the bottom line is it is a trailer, and I don't know how many times you can pop a kitchen in and pop a kitchen out before there's not much left underneath where the kitchen was put. So I have a great deal of concern with knowing what the residual value to the city of Colwood would be for leasing this out, and whether, you know, we decided, you know, we'd had enough at 3 years, or we'd had enough at 5 years, or maybe it stays there for 10 years, and maybe at 10 years that's the end of its useful life. So I'm just concerned if that's a value, because it could be lots of things. It could be, a community hub where people could gather and do events at this point in time. It could be an emergency operations center. I don't know what it could be, but it could be many things that would be of benefit to the city. And if it's a show home, it's not that. So I'm just wondering, what are the checks and balances that what we get at the end of the day is worth at least as much as what we have right now?
Through your worship, the building permitting system has an estimator that's recognized by the province to bring about the valuation of a building. So an architect may say that a building's worth $1 million and our estimator says it's worth $2 million. That's what the applicant's paying fees on. So because of that, there is an estimation tool that's available through the province that we can use to apply values, so we can avoid those arguments of $1 million bathroom really being worth $100,000. I don't intend to present an alternate consideration, but feel that I must in regards to the state of the building. There is no present heating system, period. That building will mold and rot out in its location unless the city expends capital funds to do that, which will be in excess of the lease revenues of this building in year one. And that's just looking at the heating system, not the roof, not the roofing, not the floor, not the maintenance of the paint and infrastructure, all of which will be undertaken. Now, while I may not be able to quantify the 10-year cost implications, I can quantify the 10-year potential revenues from the building, and then say that the maintenance responsibilities will be borne by the leasee. And quite frankly, there's also a performance objective in the lease as well that says that if the leasee is not performing on the development of the lands, that we can remove their right of lease without compensation because they're not meeting their term of the bargain. So I do agree that I don't have all the values for you. My apologies for that. But there is a way to check and balance that through the system, and we will continue to monitor them as best as staff. But I do think there will be a negotiative term at the end, and don't want to state otherwise.
Councillor Logan again?
Thank you, Worship. And I appreciate, Brent, you bringing up the benefits of having somebody actually in the building, because I think what we lose sight of is that building has been left vacant for a number of years. As you say, exposed to the elements, the city not receiving any revenue from that site. So that receiving the revenue right off the bat is a huge benefit to the taxpayer. Having the building maintained is a huge benefit to the taxpayer in the long run. And the third is that this building will kickstart and support the project that has not proceeded for the last number of years, which I think is another benefit which we would like to see occur. And so I think looking long term, I'm not willing to negotiate in the weeds. I trust staff in making sure that those checks and balances are there, and I'm comfortable in that the taxpayer is receiving actually plenty of value, and if we could make this lease retroactive back to July 1st, I'd be happy, but July 15th, I'm just as happy, and I think this is good value. So with that, I'm happy to, I think it's option 1 that staff is recommending, Brent?
Yes, if I may, through your worship. Option 1 says, receive this report for information and direct the Chief Administrative Officer to continue with the lease agreement for the municipal building that lies within PID 027015955, Lot 2, which is 170 Goldfinch Ave, with the right to terminate as outlined in this report, which includes the financial burden.
Seconder, please.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Nault?
Yes, as I said, I was originally against this proposal, 100%. But as it stands, we have a building that's in need of tens of thousands of dollars of repairs that's totally useless to the city right now. Without those repairs, we have the potential of getting all of those repairs over the next 5 years and $100,000 in revenue, as well as improvements to the parking lot and landscaping, which will stay with the building. So I am going to support that recommendation. I have a question to staff. Is there any way we can ensure that the money we receive from the lease gets rolled into something like park maintenance budget?
Yes, through your worship, we can direct it to any reserve or source that you would prefer.
Thank you. I would propose an amendment to the motion that the net revenues from the lease be put in a park budget reserve, because this is a city park, so to speak.
Seconder?
I was going to say I'm happy to make that part of a friendly amendment, but
Okay. Then we're good? All inclusive? Any further comments? Call the question then on that friendly amended motion. All those in favor? Opposed? None? Thank you. Under Transportation and Public Infrastructure, looking for update of special and capital project report.
Thank you, Your Worship. You have before you a report for information with regard to special and capital projects as at June 29th. As you'll see in the report, we have had some movement in our staff complement, and that has prevented us from being as far along in some areas as we would have otherwise liked. However, we are doing our best to get everything done, and I am more than happy to answer any questions you may have with regard to this update.
Thank you. I got Councillor Logan.
well, thank you. Just a quick question. Thank you, Nikki. Very valuable report, and I appreciate all the stuff that's in the hopper for engineering. I guess my question is, do we need to provide a resolution to allow staff to continue working on these projects in the first quarter of 2019, so we don't have to kind of fart around until the next year's budget is approved?
Through Your Worship, no, we do not need to do that. This is more simply a heads up so that it's not a surprise to council further along in the year than we could have provided otherwise. But there's no need to provide a resolution to have carryover funding.
You'll just continue.
Discontinues, yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Knoll?
Yes, I am keenly interested in the coastal erosion study, as are the members of ELSI who I am Colwood's representative on. Would it be possible to get a copy of that report for phase one?
Through Your Worship, yes, we can definitely package together that report and bring it to council as soon as possible after the break.
Anybody else looking for a motion to receive for information?
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? None? Thank you. Finance and Admin report on second quarter budget 2018. And the video's firing up. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Bear with us while we queue up the presentation.
Get that done. Really good.
Good-looking man.
You haven't caught up yet.
No, I don't think so.
Our IT guy is on vacation. Thank you, Your Worship. I intend to be brief, but it appears I'm going to be the longest presentation of everything that's gone through so far. More than happy to oblige. Just a couple things we're going to talk about today. I'll give you a quick summary as at June 30th, which is one day more current than Ms. Hoglin's report of June 29th. Yes, and we'll just talk about some of the things that are on the radar for 2019 and beyond. So a quick overview of our operating statement. Our revenues are currently at 80% of what our budget were, and we'll talk about the reasons for that upcoming in the next session of the presentation. Our operating expenses are currently at 44%. Transfers to reserves at 6%, and we'll discuss that further as I mentioned. Capital expenditures at 16%. Our transfers to reserves, to our savings accounts, 51%, and our debt payments are just on schedule. So our revenues, as I mentioned before, are at 80%, and the main reason for that is because our taxes and sewer user fees are levied in May. So we've earned most of our revenue for the entire year by the time Q2 finishes. Our payment in lieu of tax and our grant in lieu of tax and 1% revenue is normally received in August. We'll be receiving that then. And our operating grants are on track. We get a small communities grant of approximately $200,000, a traffic fine revenue grant, and we also have quarterly casino revenue grants. Our capital grants are consistent with gas tax funded capital. So for the capital that we spend that is funded by gas tax, it'll correlate quite a lot to that. And so right now, the amount of gas tax that we have earned is low because our capital expenditures are low by the end of Q2. Some positive news, our investment income is performing well, and that's mainly a result of our having higher levels of reserves that we've accumulated over the number of years through prudent financial management, as well as a little bit shifting in our portfolio that the city has undertaken, and our other revenue is on track. Our operating expenditures, our department budgets are on track, so they range between 35% and 46% of the range. Most of the underspending that you'll find in any of the operating departments are a result of vacancies that have since been filled. So, for instance, an HR manager is starting soon, or purchaser is starting soon, and many other positions that our senior planner has already been hired. Special projects are at 29.3%, but as reflected in the special projects chart in the report, we expect that most of the special project will be, substantially all of the special project funding will be spent by the end of the year. And there's an area planning project with a Olympic View that's currently evolving as we work with the proponent there. So we haven't spent anything there. There's a traffic study budget which was originally set at $50,000. That's for Veterans Memorial and Latoria. Staff are comfortable reducing that budget by $20,000 after scoping out the work that's necessary since budget was approved. Our reserve transfers typically are composed of two things. They're scheduled transfers. So those are the ones that council said, we're setting this money aside come hell or high water, we're putting that money away. An example is our infrastructure deficit reserve and our equipment replacement reserve. There's other reserves that really depend on developer contributions, such as our amenity contributions and our affordable housing. They're actually right on track with what we had predicted last year, but they're a bit more variable. So we've received $291K in amenity contributions and $131,000 in affordable housing contributions to date. And our capital expenditures, the main item to discuss, which we'll discuss at a later point in the presentation, is the pumper truck replacement and the timing of the RFP, which is impacting our projections for spending there. So staff are committed, as we developed the budget process last year, we committed to council to be very transparent about budget transfers when they occur, recognizing that when staff materially underspend in an operating budget or materially overspend an operating budget, it really impacts service level. And recognizing that the financial plan is a policy document by council directing staff to provide service to the community, when budget transfers occur, we are transparent and open about it. So outside of immaterial budget transfers, we'll disclose those to council. No budget transfers have occurred yet, but we expect there will be budget transfer to help fund the crossover for the Director of Corporate Services position. because we don't expect the corporate services department to be able to fund that overlap between Q3 and 4. It'll have to be funded by another department. And there's a couple of departments that have had some staff vacancies that we could see to help fund that. For instance, the HR department, we don't even have an HR manager until July 13th. So for half a year, that's been underspent. We can use that to help fund this overlap. So that's an example of a budget transfer that will be reported to council because it is material. So I think I just want to pause there and give council an opportunity to ask any questions they have about the operating budget, because then I'm going to launch into 2019 and other financial considerations. So if you have anything, I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Anything?
Wonderful. Okay. So just reiterating, our approach to budget is service level budgeting. So we went through a bit of a transformation, a bit of a pivoting as an organization, including all departments. And we really want to be able to articulate our budget in terms of service level budgeting, which Director Hockland has touched on in her report. And we are able to articulate the various services that the city provides to its citizens in this budget. But what we need to be able to do better is quantify those service levels, both in quantity and quality. Parks Department is a prime example. What services are we are providing? How many kilometers of sidewalks are we maintaining? How many kilometers of road are we maintaining? How many parks? So on and so forth. And that provides not only good, transparent information to the community, but it allows council to vary service levels according to council's strategic goals, and armed with the knowledge of what the financial impact of that is. So this is not something that's going to be perfect by 2019, but you're going to see substantial improvements to it year after year. We've got a number of infrastructure grants that are coming online, and the city wants to position itself well to be able to take advantage of those grants. The federal government, the provincial government recently signed agreements to provide substantial funding for various infrastructure projects. So it's important to us, staff, to really clarify what we recommend in a 5-year capital plan and to seek that endorsement from council. That way we can pull the trigger if an infrastructure grant can be timed well with our financial plan. We have a small communities grant, but as the name suggests, as you grow, it gets phased out. At some point, we stop becoming a small community. So staff are projecting, along with a demographic study and other information, what's the appropriate speed that we should be phasing out reliance on this grant. So that's a theme you'll see in next year's budget. And another major theme is sustainable infrastructure replacement. So the finance department, along with the other departments, have committed to providing high-level sustainable infrastructure replacement information to council before budget deliberations begin for 2019. And this provides context and to what our obligations are if we want to sustain our infrastructure and replace it when they come due, and what we need to save on an annual basis to avoid debt servicing costs. Council has a range of options. You can fund infrastructure with debt. You can fund infrastructure with savings. You can fund infrastructure with various forms of taxation like local service areas, or a mix of all of the above. But this information provides context to council to make those strategic decisions in the future. I wanted to touch on developer-contributed assets, and there's been a number of good examples at today's council meeting. Murray's Pond and the platform that council may consider building and putting into the budget in 2019, and the parks that Royal Bay will be at some point handing over the keys to the city. They all come with operating costs, and they come with operating costs because they come with community expectations of maintenance. So we heard today what a high-level estimate of what maintaining the Royal Bay parks is. And that being said, when we have new development, we have subdivisions, we have new building, we also have new tax revenue, right? We have a larger tax base. So what we've done as a policy is to set aside that new tax revenue, that revenue that's generated from new development, to help fund the obligations that come with it. And those obligations aren't just the regular maintenance that come with it, but it's also replacement of those assets that we're given. So if we're given new sidewalks, we're given new roads, maybe we should start saving right away when we're given those to replace those 25, 30 years down the road. So making that link between the new revenue that we get from development and the new costs that come with it, and keeping those together. As you're aware, the provincial government is phasing out medical service plan premiums and replacing it with an employer health tax. Recent announcement exempted certain employer categories, and unfortunately that didn't include the municipal governments and local governments. So we're still subject to this tax, and we expect it to increase operating costs across the city by about $50,000. So that's going to be reflected in next year's budget. 2019 is a bit of an awkward year because we have to pay MSP as well as the health tax, but we'll fund MSP probably with surplus so that we don't see that variation in the tax rate as a result, because it'll drop off in 2020 immediately. And then we're just in what I believe is the later stages of transitioning our fire dispatch to Surrey, and we expect savings in around the range of $50,000 plus as a result. I mentioned in the report that we hired a purchaser with a vacant position in the finance department, and part of the purview of the purchasing position is to do a thorough review of contract that we have. It's already incumbent on staff to ensure we're getting best value for money, and this resource will really help centralize that role and ensure that we're getting best value for money throughout the organization. Next thing I want to talk about is our risk to roll. As I'm sure council is well aware, every year BC Assessment sends out assessment notices to all our properties, and the property owners have the ability to appeal those assessments. If those assessments continue on after the revised roll, which is what we use to tax, we can be subject to having to refund those taxes if they rule in their favor. So we want to start setting aside some money just to recognize that and be prepared to pay that. I'm probably going to propose a range of $20,000. I know we've had some very large refunds in the past, but trying to use historical information to provide a reasonable budget for that. There's a lease that we just talked about. Investment income we've talked about. And emergency management. The CRD is implementing a emergency system that will enable our community to subscribe to in the case of a tsunami, an earthquake, or any other natural disaster. Much like the peninsula municipalities, they've jointly created an emergency system there. So the CRD is creating this system, and the participating municipalities will be asked to pay a subscription fee based on how many of their citizens subscribe for it. So we're estimating the cost to be around $5,000, but that's something that will be presented to council as a new item in the 2019 budget. And we believe that we can phase that $5,000 impact in over a couple of years, since subscriptions will take a bit of time to phase up. The owners of the RCMP detachment are currently negotiating with the RCMP regarding the lease rates, the owners being View Royal, Colwood, and Langford. And typically in the past, the lease revenue that we've derived from that building have offset the operating costs. So there's been very little impact to the city year by year. Preliminary estimates are such that there will be a net operating cost going forward. And if that's the case, the city will have to pay its proportionate share of that operating cost. Discussions are still ongoing, but these are just very preliminary observations. One thing that we might want to do to mitigate the impact of that is we seem to be experiencing operating surpluses from the RCMP contract based on their inability to staff a full complement. So we could simply use that operating surplus on an annual basis to mitigate this. It's one of the options available to council anyways that will be presented in 2019. And the fire truck purchase is the big ticket item that we put into the budget for $900,000. We didn't anticipate that we'd be able to actually make this purchase and start constructing the fire truck this year, but we wanted the full value of the budget in the capital 2018 plan in case there was an opportunity and in case we were able to complete it. The macroeconomic conditions in the States are such now that the Canadian dollar has dipped significantly and is putting some upward pressure on the cost of the construction of that truck. So the fire chief at the moment, he's trying to time strategically based on events in the future, I know we're using our crystal ball, that might improve the Canadian dollar or availability. If that's not the case, you may see a request coming back to council for asking for additional funds for the purchase of that lease, complemented with options to reduce the service capacity of that and remain within the 900,000 budget. I've done a preliminary analysis on the equipment replacement fund that we have. An additional $100,000 is something that we could afford and remain sustainable based on the annual contributions we make, but nevertheless, it's an extra $100,000. We want to be as prudent as we can and present council with all of the options there. And last thing to mention is the Murray's Pond Boardwalk, which I didn't mention in the report, but needed to complement some of my colleagues' reports. This boardwalk, we would likely propose to be funded by the community's amenities reserve, so we have a fund available for that. But again, it's another example of something that comes with additional operating and maintenance costs and replacement obligations. So that will conclude my my presentation for tonight. I apologize for the length, but I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. I think we have a question from Councillor Nault.
Yes, on the RCMP building lease, I'm upset that it's traditionally covered the operating expenses of the building and now it's not going to. This to me represents a tax increase to pay the RCMP. Can we instruct our negotiators to be sure that the negotiated lease covers the operating costs?
Through your worship, yeah, feasibly, yes, that's something that we could tell them to do. Then that's our position. We're one of three owners. It does muddy the waters, but it sends clear direction to the negotiator. Yeah.
So could I move that as an instruction to staff?
To add into
Out of this report, to have an instruction to staff to instruct our negotiators that we would prefer that the lease be negotiated to cover the operating expenses.
Seconder for discussion? Discussion? Councillor Lubin?
Thank you, Worship. I think the real targets here would be the provincial component of West Shore RCMP. So the Machosans, Highlands, and First Nations, where the province and the federal government on the First Nation side pay a share of the lease to the owners. So I think making sure that those folks are paying their share. Otherwise, we're really taxing the owners.
And that was my point exactly, is that this winds up being a tax on the three owning municipalities and an extra bonus for municipalities like Machosen.
I think that I really appreciate the sentiment that goes with that, but I think that we should ask, rather than just to direct staff to negotiate, I think we should get a report and see what we can do to make that work better, because it is about communicating with the other members, and we are one of three owners. So I think we need to get everybody on the same page, and I know that's not always easy to do. So I think we'd be better served by having the full explanation from staff before we jump in with a solution.
My problem with that is the lease is currently under negotiation, and our next council meeting is not scheduled till the end of August. So if we can get staff those instructions and they can communicate them to the other owners, maybe we'll get operating from the same page. I'm not sure when the lease has to be finished by, but maybe the CAO can answer that.
Your Worship, this is a extremely complicated subject that we won't be able to tackle in any detail tonight. The lease itself, though, is was correctly stated. It's for the provincial members, not the municipal members or the municipally funded RCMP. It's for the provincially funded RCMP to occupy our office space. And the lease has been expired for several years. We have been on and off negotiating a new lease, but it is considerably complicated in that the federal government, the RCMP, have actually got the jurisdiction to renegotiate these leases, even though it is for the provincial members within each police station. This has been going on throughout the entire province. So there's, in West Shore, we've got the three owners essentially trying to resolve this problem with the RCMP, but it also is happening. The three municipalities for West Shore are also participating in a province-wide conversation about the very same problem that every single municipality in the province is encountering in dealing with the RCMP. They have unilaterally dictated to us, this is the amount we're going to pay, and it has no sense to it whatsoever. Pardon the pun. Right now, we're just trying to get to a place where we can come to an agreement on what's fair and reasonable, because what they charge us, if we're occupying one of their federal buildings, is considerably higher than what they pay us if they're occupying one of ours. And that's a problem. So we're trying to get to this place where what they charge us is what we charge them. And if that happens, then the costs, that the revenues that we were receiving that just happened to cover off our operating and maintenance costs will probably continue to cover them off, or very close to cover them off. I don't see any harm in getting this motion. It's helpful for me when we're sitting both at the table of three and talking among all of the municipalities at the same time. It's helpful for me to have direction from council saying, well, if we can't cover the operating costs, we're going to put you in an ATCO trailer in the back of the parking lot. You know, it's because that's the, you know, we've made those, I wouldn't say threats, but we've in jest made those comments that if you're not going to pay for your share of the building, then we're going to put you in an ATCO trailer. And any type of direction from council, just, it helps me when we're sitting at that table.
So with that, and we have a seconder, is there any other comments, questions? Call the question then on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? None? Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments in regards to the overall report from Finance?
One final comment. This was very helpful to have. I'm hoping that we will get one for the third quarter, because it'll be a very good document to set in front of the new council.
Councillor Martin?
Thank you. Regarding the fire truck, have we looked at all about hedging some US dollars on that? Because I'm looking at a forecast right now. Right now it's trading at 1.31. Worst case scenario, well, which is ridiculous, is they're saying 1.53. But the realistic is 1.46, which would represent $150,000 if we were hedging.
Through your worship, absolutely. The fire chief and I have had discussions about hedging. The difficulty is our inability to predict the future, because if we hedge right now, there's a cost to hedging, and it's more than what the current dollar is right now. So if we think that there's macroeconomic events that may improve the Canadian dollar, such as the central bank on Wednesday, whether or not they approve an interest rate hike, the Canadian dollar will improve. If they don't, the Canadian dollar will drop. So I think there's a point where we absolutely need to hedge to ensure that the budget doesn't get way beyond our control. and we will do that if that's necessary.
When?
Through your worship, strategically speaking, November, when U.S. midterm elections occur.
Councillor Knoll.
On the same question then, is there any way we could buy this truck in Canada?
Through your worship, actually, many of the providers are through Canada. Many of the manufactured parts are through the States.
Anyone else? Councillor Logan.
Thank you. I just want to zero in on the casino revenue comment. So I strongly support staff's direction in that. When the casino opened, there was actually a policy that had 3 stipulations to it. One was a third would go to savings, a third would go to debt reduction, and then a third would go to infrastructure and capital. And so I agree that revenue can be volatile, and it's never guaranteed. So I think there could be some really significant community benefit if we utilize that funding for infrastructure, coupled with our infrastructure replacement fund. So I look forward to seeing that in the future.
Anybody else? Just one comment from me. These additions or add-in funds, like the risk to roll and those ones, are we going to see that then in budget discussions for 2019? Is that where it's going to rubber hit the road?
Correct, absolutely. Yep.
Anybody else? Motion then to receive? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. No opposition. We are looking to Councillor Day in regards to a report back from AVICC.
Great. I'll try to make it brief, although my notes never are. I tried really hard to bring back the facts as they were presented to us at AVICC. There was particularly a big report out from the Joint Provincial Local Government Committee on Cannabis Regulation. And the good news is that the actions that the City of Colwood have been taking are in line with the recommendations from that committee, particularly that you can't really do too much about senior levels of government's choices in terms of their regulations. We follow what they do. And their suggestion is the best that we can do is to prohibit until we know what is allowed. And just a couple of interesting notes, because a lot of people don't know, public consumption sites are not allowed under the current legislation. And the largest cost for municipalities will be to our policing. They recommended a couple of things, including tiebreaker rules, so that if there is a licensed vendor in your community and another one comes along, who gets to stay. Their best practice is to prohibit everywhere and require zoning to permit the sale of cannabis. And for personal cultivation, it is you're allowed 4 plants per residence. They are not allowed to be visible from public spaces, and it's a per residence quota, so it's not a per person, and it would apply on a per strata dwelling basis. And there is no grandfathering of a business license. There was a great keynote address by Charles Montgomery, an urban design consultant, who talked about the Happy City, a book that he has written. And he noted that long commutes alone in your car decrease your personal happiness because we are largely social beings. We are more likely to feel connected where we can interact. So those parks that we were looking at the plans for, those are really important. He talked about the length of your driveway being more of a determinant of how happy you are. If it's too long, you don't see enough people, and if it's too short, you're on top of each other. So very important to find that just right, perfect mix. On affordable housing, there was quite considerable interest in affordable housing. The most affordable housing already exists. So older homes that are rented out are the most affordable. So the question is how to preserve that housing. Exempting taxation for up to 10 years, which also exempts them from school taxes, realizes a $4,000 to $10,000 reduction in costs over 10 years. So that's one way to encourage the retention of older homes. And they mentioned that we need 14,350 rental units over the next 10 years. And I believe that was for the Capital Regional District, but I didn't write that in my notes exactly which one it was. Another big thing that we talked about tonight was about the potential for sea level rise. There was a really excellent presentation on green shores and more, which is identified that a key role in providing, the ocean provides a key role in ocean with services such as erosion control and flood management. And the sea level rise and climate adaptation planning and balancing our community needs really require some special resources. He noted that it took 20,000 years for the ice to melt the last time, and it looks like we've had about that much melt in just 1 year in the last year. And after the year 2050, the sea level is predicted to rise sharply. And there was things that we now consider exciting and beautiful, storm watching, is going to get dangerous. So they have developed some guidance materials with a rating system similar to the LEED system for buildings of gold, silver, and bronze. And there are categories for institutions, for multifamily, and for parks. And they have specific measurements that allow verification. And they said it was very important to hire a coastal engineer to find the solution that fits your unique situation, because local topography can be very different situation in one area from another. And lastly, but not leastly,
excuse me, I have a question on the green shores.
Yes.
Your next to last paragraph on page 104 says we have been seeing a sea level rise since 2011 of 33 meters per year. I think my house would be about 150 meters underwater by now. Is that centimeters, millimeters?
I'd have to go back and check my notes. Obviously, I've got that one wrong. But
it did seem a little excessive.
Yes, it is excessive. But I did look up the YouTube video that he pointed us to that had, rather than try to take pictures of all the graphs that he had, there was a pretty impressive set of data that does detail the sea level rise. So I'm sure the actual numbers are in that. So, and I think I've put the link in here somewhere. But I will look it up and I'll let you know.
Thank you. I'd like to see that link as well, because the estimates of sea level rise are all over the map, and the latest I've been getting are that what we're currently using for municipal planning are way lower than what they are now expecting. So it would be useful for the city to get updated on exactly what the current flavor of the month is. It'll probably change by the end of the year.
Yeah, so far from my reading of the information, it seems to be following along from the last AVICC update on Green Shores that we had, which was that they were predicting a 1 meter sea level rise in our area. So I'll see what the latest update is. On the opioid epidemic, that's certainly an area of concern for many people. 1 in 10 in BC have some sort of dependency. The medical health officer enjoyed pointing out that tobacco will kill just as many people. But fentanyl is responsible for more deaths in BC than traffic, homicide, and suicide combined. which I thought was pretty startling statistics. There are 9 overdose sites, and they get about 100,000 visits. And of the 820 overdoses that have occurred at the sites, there have been no deaths. So the message was that the safe sites do really make a difference. There was a Netflix film that they showed called 6 Balloons to understand the cycle of addiction and help to create a better understanding of the moments when change is available to addicts and what the barriers are to making that change. Marianne Alto from Victoria spoke quite a bit about their experiences, and she said that municipalities can play a role, but they don't have any authority. They act because the residents are dying. It's as simple as that. The safe injection sites do reduce barriers to people entering detox, and one of the biggest problems that they have with detox is that once they get participants into a detox program, they find it very difficult to find another program to move them on to so that their space comes open in that program again. A lot of the participants come from having inadequate or no housing. So leaving the program means leaving all of the security that they've just found behind. And so that continuum of services is really necessary to make a difference. And there is a petition currently going around to decriminalize dependency, and that's being aimed at the federal government, and to make it a priority to treat people, they make it a priority to treat people who seem disordered. So if you're really crazy, somebody's going to come and do something about you. But if you're just suffering and don't have the things that you need for life, there's not really anybody out there advocating for those people. So there's a long way to go on that. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Motion to receive. Thank you.
Second.
Any comments or questions to Councillor Day?
I'd just like to commend her on such a thorough report, and I appreciate all the feedback.
Yes. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And finally, in that section, we have a report. Engineering, Public Works, Corporate Services, request for direction on the use of artificial turf on city boulevards.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is just a follow-up on the recent council meeting where it was put before council a request to approve artificial turf that had been placed on the city boulevard. You'll recall back in 2016, council had passed a motion directing staff to make that an unacceptable type of covering for boulevards. But it seems that the past couple of council meetings, council has been approving them on a case-by-case basis. So staff felt that it was appropriate to bring the 2016 resolution back in front of council to either have that resolution confirmed or to look to council to have that resolution rescinded. I do want to mention, though, my apologies. I either had a hiccup or a interruption because the report speaks to relevant minute excerpts being included in the package from July 2016, comma, and then that's the end of the sentence. And we didn't provide the excerpts because we purposely intended not to, since we'd just recently been having these discussions. So just in case anybody was looking for them, I did place them around everybody's workstation tonight so that you could refresh your memory on the last few discussions on this issue.
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Comments, questions? Councillor Nault, first hand in there. Councillor Bay?
I will not be supporting this recommendation. I did not support it when we originally discussed it. And I find it very ironic that the same council that is legislating residents into managing trees in their own yards will be allowing them to put plastic grass on our boulevards. I think it's absurd.
So I would concur that there's a number of places where people applied to the city and were told that no, they could not put artificial turf. So they've gone to great lengths to do something else. And now that they've gone to expense and great effort to make those boulevards look beautiful and natural, are now being told something completely different. I understand why council made the exceptions that they did, because those boulevards were contiguous with the artificial turf that they put in the front of their lawn. Regardless that I don't agree with artificial turf for a number of reasons, most of all being that that's a huge amount of plastic going straight into our landfill. And second of all, that we have no bugs and no, if you don't have any bugs, you don't have any birds to eat the bugs. and there, I realize we have beautiful parks and we spend lots of money looking after them, but the boulevards were something that I thought was going to be natural like the rest of Colwood. But you know, if you choose to do that, I think we do need to treat the boulevards that are continuous with your property differently than the boulevards that might be on the other side of a sidewalk, because there's a number of places where we've been required. There's one on the corner in Royal Bay where I walk by it, and they've put in a lovely curved curb, and they've got bark mulch on this side, and they've got grass on that side. They put bark mulch in because they didn't want to have to mow all of it, and because, you know, you live on a corner, you know, not everyone picks up after their pooch. And they had an awful lot of boulevard that they were looking after. So they put something that's less likely to be used that way. And it's aesthetically pleasing, and it also fit in with our policies. So I do think that we need to think about, you know, I've seen they're using it in Langford for the medians in the highway. I mean, I think I don't love it, and it's still landfill creation, but the alternative is maybe cement or, you know, rocks with cement holding it in place. There are perhaps some places where it could be more beautiful, I guess, but I really think that we should look at how we're doing this and what we've asked people to do already, that now we're just throwing out the window because two people came and had two situations where we thought it was okay.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Yeah, so I won't be supporting the motion either. I was fine with the 2 one-offs, and I'm actually still fine with having one-offs in the future if council decided that it was specifically appropriate. I just don't think it should be a first choice as somebody's building out. So I'm actually still very comfortable, even though it seems inconsistent with what I've voted in the past. I am very comfortable with the 2 people that we did allow, but I don't think it should be a standard.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't think we're going to have a run on artificial turf, and for me, it's not my thing. I do like a green lawn, personally, but I think Councillor Day hit the nail on the head in terms of contiguous, and that was my point, I think, at the last council meeting. If it's contiguous, then we should allow it. I mean, it looks really silly if we leave 6 or 8 feet of city boulevard that is contiguous to a lawn to a homeowner's property left, you know, in disrepair in another state. So I think you know, my goal is, yeah, let's have it contiguous right up to the curb. Having that sidewalk that separates a boulevard, I think it's a totally different story, which I think we should have a discussion on. But further, you know, I think we should give some further latitude to residents too, who take the initiative to improve their boulevards. And I'm aware, and we had a presentation from a resident who lives on Antrobus where a municipal enforcement at the time stopped and gave the residents a bit of a rough time for not taking out a highways use permit or whatever to improve their boulevard, like the rest of their neighbors have already done. I'm not sure, maybe through you, Your Worship, to Pat, how we can differentiate a contiguous property versus something that's separated by sidewalk, a boulevard separated by sidewalk.
I think that might be better suited for the Director of Engineering to respond to. I'm not sure. But part of the issue is also a lot of people are doing the installation and then coming to the city as well. So it's, it's a bigger problem.
Through Your Worship, the main crux of why we felt it important to bring this issue back is inconsistency. So staff really have a hard time messaging out to residents if there's inconsistency. So regardless of whether the artificial turf is contiguous or not, it's more of a consistent messaging to residents when they call in. Can we have artificial turf, yes or no? So that actually is the bigger problem for staff is the inability to actually give them an answer.
Right. So the one-offs are really screwing things up in terms of being...
They do provide a lot of difficulty for staff who are at the front line sometimes before people install it and sometimes after people install it. So consistency really helps the day-to-day running of the program, as it were, especially with right-of-way permits. So for example, right-of-way permits have on them right now that it's not allowed. Full stop. And if it is allowed in some instances, it suddenly becomes a very gray area for staff. And it also will have a lot of implications insofar as people not liking what staff say, coming to council meetings, and it's fair enough. That's part and parcel of local governance. But it is a lot easier for staff to be able to say yes or no, regardless of really where it's located.
Thank you, through Your Worship. So I will fully admit I have definitely been the inconsistent voter in this. I struggle with this because there's so much information online, and when I look for reasons to have artificial grass, there's just as many to not have artificial grass, and it's really hard to tell what's being properly verified and tested. I was going to say if we wanted to proceed with artificial grass, there has been a measurement in quality. So I have found companies that have had their artificial grass LEED certified and that are in fact 100% recyclable. So far, the research that I've done indicates that there isn't a recycling facility in Victoria, but that's not to say there won't be one in the near future. So as it stands now, I will not be supporting this recommendation because, as other councillors have stated, the bird gets the worm and the squirrel gets the grass, and this isn't possible with artificial turf at the time. There's also other reasons why artificial turf might not be beneficial in the long run. It doesn't absorb like natural grass and natural earth. And I guess just a question to staff, there's a lot of numbers. Artificial grass could last 10 to 20 years to 25 years, and artificial grass that isn't well made, perhaps 8 years I've seen. So if a property owner were to sell their property and then someone else is now in there and the artificial grass is not well maintained and doesn't look good, who gets stuck with the bill to rip it out? Is it the property owner who's responsible for maintaining that boulevard, or is it the city?
Through Your Worship, our current bylaw indicates that it is the homeowner that fronts the boulevard that is responsible for the upkeep of that boulevard. So in that instance, it would be up to the new homeowner to deal with the problem that the old homeowners left behind.
And just following up on that, I think is another, well, maybe a unintended consequence of improving artificial turf is someone else is going to be stuck with ripping up the artificial turf that would have otherwise preferred natural. So that's it. Thank you.
Anybody else? Going on, I think Councillor Chung and I were looking at the same websites for quality and that sort of thing, because one of the things that crossed my mind is how far are we away from our new subdivision bylaw?
Through your worship, we are working on it when staff time permits. It is one of the special projects that is in the list that we talked about earlier. We have our standards at around the 90% mark, and now we're starting to get into the administrative side of things. Now, this definitely is an administrative side of things. It would be, we would either allow it or not, and it would just be clearly articulated in the new bylaw.
Just for me, I find that in most of the ones that we've seen, at least this far, it's in small applications. And my concern and whatever is if we were to pick up on this and make it an option available, that if we don't look at standards and qualities and that sort of thing and set the bar, then, we could easily end up with that $4.99 roll Gulf Green strip grass that you can buy at Canadian Tire. And I don't think that that's in anybody's desire. But we also saw a piece that had been provided by an applicant here in the past that was very lush, and from a distance you couldn't tell the difference between real grass and not real grass, and had the full porous and non-odor and recyclable and all of that. So I think, as you've said, that there are standards available, and I'm wondering if this is we haven't been over inundated with calls and requests, but I think if we take a hard stand, we could very well end up with those ones who put it in and come in and ask later and that sort of thing. Whereas if we actually create a standard, it may well be that no, they'll just rather put in some seed and mow it every week. Thank you very much.
Through your worship, it is difficult for staff to articulate a standard for artificial turf. It is also difficult for staff to create a standard and ensure that people put in artificial turf in the manner it is supposed to be put in. So you're not just looking at the grass itself, you're looking at the substrate underneath it. And it is quite problematic, the substrate underneath it as well. It would be very onerous for staff, even if we did manage to get some standards, to be able to know if it has been, if the standards have been adhered to. It's very different with a sidewalk panel, for example. We can tell if the standards have been have been met. Artificial turf is a lot trickier. We wouldn't. It doesn't come with a tag that says this is Sinlawn XYZ, and there's just it would be harder to try to ensure that people were abiding by it. I think honestly, it's one of those things that you either have to allow or not. The only thing we could possibly do is indicate it has to be green, as opposed to purple or some other color that might complement the outside of their house.
Purple. You can get it to match your hair.
Yeah. Okay, council, where do you want to take it? So we have the everything's up there, and what happens to the two people that have already been approved? Grandfathered in? We're not playing ping pong, wishy-washy back and forth? So, okay. The recommendation is before us. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion. Who's opposed? I want to count. Okay. So opposed is that we are not rescinding the 2016. All in favor? Or motion fails.
Through your worship.
Negative. It's a backwards one.
Through your worship, it may be easier to simply take option number 1, which is that the resolution of July 11th, 2016 be confirmed.
Okay. Yeah, in the straight way. Otherwise, it's a negative thing. It looks odd.
Correct.
Okay, I prefer this other one then. Motion and seconded. All those in favor of option 1? Against? Passes. And next one is bylaw number 1732 for final reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And the final bylaw before us this evening is 1700. Staff first the report, because we have to, if following the process, there'll be a step-by-step here.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As outlined in the staff report, staff are recommending, on the heels of public engagement conducted between first, second reading, and the public hearing for bylaw 1700, that some minor amendments be made to the draft OCP, taking the form of 9 new maps to be added to the ends, a new section F. These maps are meant to fully meet the requirements of the Local Government Act with respect to such background mapping. It is not common for official main plans to take such a comprehensive look at these maps, but we feel is important given the issues surrounding the OCP, that it be resilient to any challenge post-adoption. We're also recommending at this time to take advantage of this step in the process to correct an error with respect to the Royal Bay area map, and replace a water map that was doubled with a sewer map that was missed previously. So the amended bylaw is in the bylaw section. The new maps are included with the staff report. I understand that Councillor Nault may be making some suggested improvements to the maps, and I thank him for addressing those with me earlier today. I think it's probably behooving of me to outline the recommendations, as they are a bit complex in terms of the process moving forward. Staff are recommending that Council rescind the first and second readings of the Fish Community Plan bylaw, and then secondly, that the amendments to bylaw 1700 as set out in the staff report are approved, and that a second first reading as amended of bylaw 1700 be given by Council. The next step, as recommended by staff, is that the amended bylaw be considered in conjunction with the city's financial plan and applicable waste management plans as set forth in the Local Government Act. And after this step, that Council directs staff to refer the amended bylaw to Agricultural Land Commission as per section 477 of the Local Government Act. And finally, that Council directs staff to carry out appropriate consultation on the amended bylaw as per sections 475 and 476 of the Local Government Act. The staff report outlines an amended timeline for completion of the Fish Community Plan bylaw process that would see a special council meeting held on July 30th, 2018, and then following that a second public hearing for the amended bylaw and consideration of third and fourth reading at that same night. With that, I conclude my introduction. Thank you.
Questions to staff?
Yes, sorry, can I just clarify one thing? So is staff suggesting that we have the public hearing on August 27th or before August 27th?
Through the mayor, the proposal is that August 27th be the date of the new public hearing.
And third and fourth would be considered at the same time?
Correct.
Okay. There's no, just to clarify, there's no regulatory responsibility to wait after a public hearing? We can go straight to third and fourth? I just want to ensure. It is? Okay.
What's being, excuse me, through your worship, what's being proposed is a public hearing as a independent event is held, and then immediately following that at the regular council meeting that is scheduled for August 27th, or a special meeting on another date, that consideration be given to third and fourth reading. So there's no legislative requirement for there to be a delay between the public hearing and consideration of third and fourth reading. And that's specific to official committee plans.
Staff?
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I can just clarify, normally there is a requirement when you're adopting bylaws to have a clear 24 hours between third reading and final readings, but legislation is very specific with respect to official community plans and zoning or land use bylaws that says, despite the legislation that says you need that full day in between, an OCP or a rezoning bylaw can receive third and final reading the same night, and the same night as a public hearing if that's what council chooses. So.
Any other questions of staff? So first step, council, if we're following the process, would be to rescind first and second readings of the Colwood Official Community Plan, bylaw number 1700/2018. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. We now need to ask Councillor Nault, because you have some red letter additions to those maps that staff identified as being additions to this.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I reviewed the OCP, the new OCP maps, I noticed there were some deficiencies in the Belmont Park area. We have identified several facilities on D&D land already within the municipal plan, so to be consistent, I thought they should all be identified. So I would move that...
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, I'm sorry to interrupt. I do believe that we should probably introduce the amendments proposed by the Director of Planning first in order to establish the new maps under the new sections. And then it's those new maps that I believe that Councillor Nault's recommendations are correcting.
That's right.
So we should probably reverse the order of...
Okay, so I would move we accept the maps as, how would we put that?
If we could use the wording that's
Maps
provided.
1 through 9?
Yes.
You want B? Is that what you want read?
So, yeah, if
Well-
we could use the wording of B.
B, okay, so I would move B.
Thank you.
Without the red lettering at this point, folks.
Those would be moved once there's,
Any questions on that?
and then I would move, I believe,
Well,
amendments.
let me call that one. Because do we make the amendments?
You could do an
Ian?
amendment to that resolution, or you can pass that and then ask for an additional motion
What
to
makes it
amend
the
the
most
maps.
clear going forward? Historically, when people look back at this,
Worship, I would prefer that you do B, black.
Yep.
And then amend the maps based on
I agree.
Councilor Nault's amendments.
I agree.
and so we don't, like, and then we can just move amended B.
Correct. Well, it would be,
No, it would be a new resolution to
A new
amend
resolution?
the...
Okay,
so
so
the first thing would be to introduce the nine new maps. Like amend the bylaw by adding the 9 new maps. That would be the first step. The second step would have Councilor Nault amend those 9 new maps that have just been added to the bylaw.
okay. So we're at an amendment of the bylaw.
Matt, can I just read out
Yes.
the motion that we're looking for?
I've got it.
Yeah, and B is that the amendments to bylaw 1700-2018 as set out in appendices 1 and 2 of the report dated July 3rd, entitled Proposed Amendments to the Colwood Official Community Plan bylaw number 1700-2018 be approved.
So that's what's on the table. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Now, Councillor Nault.
Now, I would move an amendment to those maps, and as I said, this is just to straighten up a little bit of what's missing on what is D&D property. So I would move amendments as follows. Colwood Official Community Plan bylaw 1700-2018 be further amended by adding to map 1 the Canex store at 177 Belmont Road as a commercial use, and by amending map 9 by adding the following: the St. Peter's Protestant Chapel on Virago Crescent as a church use, the Our Lady of the Sea Chapel on Galliano Crescent as a church use, and the Youth Activity Center at 720 Galliano Crescent as other public facilities.
Any discussion on those? Councillor Martin?
Thank you. Can I just confirm that staff concur?
Your worship, staff have no objections to the proposed amendment.
Anybody else? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Now this is where we get to a motion before us that Colwood Community Plan bylaw number 1700-2018 be given first reading as amended.
If I may, Madam Mayor, that is going to be as amended when it gets to the appropriate stage under the agenda, which is under the bylaw section.
Oh, that's in our next breath. This is a report.
Correct.
Okay.
So our next resolution for consideration would be D, that council consider the amended bylaw in conjunction with the city's financial plan and with any applicable waste management plans. Where are we? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, we have to go. Okay. Sorry, we're just clarifying the processes and the steps. So, but we're not under the, we have to finish the staff discussion, which we can do now, and then move into the bylaw.
Yes.
Away from the
So
report.
the other ones are under bylaw. Anything further under report staff? Anything further?
No, your worship.
You don't need for tentative dates or anything like that?
Yes.
Or is that till later?
Madam Mayor, staff will be directly working with council to make sure the proposed dates would be viable in terms of attendance.
So we will now move into the bylaw section, bylaw number 1700.
Madam Mayor, can I just confirm where we are on the agenda now?
Last item.
We've received the report
And made the amendments.
and we've made the amendments, and now we are now in the bylaw
Into the
section.
bylaw, correct.
And then, so our next motion would be that the Colwood Official Community Plan bylaw be given first reading as amended.
No, I think we go to D
We're good.
and E.
No, first
No,
reading as
first
amended.
reading first.
First reading as amended first? Y'all got me confused now.
Sorry.
Okay.
So I would move that the Official Community Plan as amended be given first reading.
All those in favor? Opposed? None. Motion carries.
Sorry, staff should confirm that the amended bylaw meets the city's financial plan and applicable waste management plans. I don't believe that's in your report.
Your worship, it was very briefly touched on in section 4 of the staff report on page 3 of 5. Staff see no conflict with the draft OCP as amended with either the city's financial plan or applicable waste management plans.
Okay, thank you. So in that case, I would move that council consider the amended bylaw in conjunction with the city's financial plan and any applicable waste management plan, and that council, having considered the amended bylaw with in conjunction with the city's financial plan and any applicable waste management plan, direct staff to refer the amended bylaw to the Agricultural Land Commission under Section 477 of the Local Government Act, and that council direct staff to carry out appropriate consultation of the amended bylaw under Sections 475 and 476 of the Local Government Act.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Move adjournment.
I'll give you that one.
He was too fast for you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.